Hello and welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Lindsay Broger and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
And for today's show, we're going to talk about what each of us would do if we were new authors starting from scratch today with the knowledge that we now have as career authors after 10 years of publishing. And I've actually had the opportunity to do this once before with a then anonymous pen name. But for me, it's been more than 5 years since I launched that pen name project. So basically everything's hypothetical at this point. Things change quite a bit in the world of indie publishing, especially indie marketing. But Andrea has actually got a new anonymous pen name going now. So hopefully she can chime in a bit on that. And we'll ask each other a few questions, try to anticipate what you guys might be asking or thinking. And to make things realistic, semi-realistic, we're going to give ourselves a $2,500 budget as new authors, which it's quite a bit more than I spent on my first book. I did not have that much money back then, but for mine, I have a rapid release strategy, so I need to cover at least 3 books. So I'm being a little generous here with that. So that I can get the covers and edits for the 3 books and have a teeny little bit left over for promotion. So we will just pretend that my hypothetical starting from scratch self has a decent job and or a supportive family, that there's a little bit of money to invest in this, and hopefully you guys are in the same boat. But like I said, I wasn't in the beginning, and I know a lot of other people aren't either. But yeah, before we jump into that, do you guys have any news that you'd like to share?
Sure. As we record this, my Epic Fantasy Book 3 will be getting back from the editor tomorrow. So if I'm good, then by the time you're listening to this, I will have a pre-order out for Epic Fantasy 3. And I'm probably only gonna do like a 1-week pre-order. And at the end of the month, I'll be releasing my top level player, my lit RPG style Ready Player One-ish type book. So I'm going to have a pretty dense November and then really nothing major until March. My next editing slot is at the end of February, but I'm hoping to fill the time in between. I have not done collected editions of I've finished 3 series and I haven't done collections that include the concluding books of those series. And I had already developed a plan where I was going to do volume 2s that have the last 3 books in each series, and then complete editions that I sell directly on my website. So I'll probably roll that plan out, during that gap in my release schedule. And as I write this, I have not yet decided what I'm going to be doing for NaNoWriMo. The next book that I intended to write was going to be book 4 of the Epic Fantasy, but I'm sort of a purist with NaNoWriMo. I don't just want to hit 50,000 words. I want to finish a novel, and I don't trust myself to completely finish a full-length Epic Fantasy in 30 days, especially not when Thanksgiving is in there. So I'm going to do a palate cleanser, and I haven't chosen what that is yet, but it's going to be something short, possibly a sequel to one of my standalones that I've done in the past to try to eke out a minor series instead of just a standalone. But we'll see. But hopefully by the time people are listening to this, I'll have an answer to that question, but not yet. Yeah, and that's where I am right now.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Andrea's got something over her face. Oh, are you ready to go next, Andrea? Or did you have any comments for Joe?
I am. And now I have the best beard of the show.
You're going to confuse people.
Except it's like getting in my mouth.
Sexy.
Wait, yeah. Did you say it's sexy?
Of course.
Oh,
Andrea the lumberjack.
There we go. Oh my gosh, this thing is horrible.
This will be coming out right before Halloween, so I guess that's appropriate.
Okay, so my news. The desired, there, up above my nose. There we go. That doesn't work either. Dang it. I'm just going to take it off. Gross. Well, that failed.
Can we get an edit here on aisle 3? Computer 3?
Okay, so anyway, so my update. The desire to write is there, but I'm still struggling with the cognitive part of it. My last major surgery in 2014 was my knees, and it took several months for the general anesthesia and the painkillers and all of that to leave my system. So I've officially given myself permission to stop wanting to write until I've healed more. In the meantime, I'm unpacking boxes. and figuring out storage systems because we're renting our basement to my brother and his friend, and then getting our toddler in for a lot of testing. He's been just having so many issues. It's been awful. And then I've been building shelves because of the storage problem and doing a bunch of DIY projects and then homeschooling the kids. And I'm finding a lot of creative outlets in most of these things. So the itch to write has been satisfied somewhat. So that's good. And then I just try not to think too much about it because it just drives me crazy. And really it's upsetting because like I can't do what I want to be doing. I've also scheduled my first promotion on my romance book. I decided to do it 99 cents since there's only it and the next book in the series. Actually, I think I did a promotion when it first launched, and I did not, because I was moving. No, we went to Hawaii. That's what happened. I didn't get to do as much on it as I'd wanted to. So this is my first big promotion on it, but the second promotion I've done. Anyway, so I'm doing it at 99 cents since there's only it in the next book in the series. I will do another promotion at free once there's 3 or more books. And I honestly could have done it free this time just to get a lot of subscribers to my newsletter list, because when you do free, you get more downloads and don't always make back the money, especially if you have only 1 or 2 or no later books in the series. But subscribers are usually better than a download. Anyway, let's see. Okay, so I can't wait to see how that promotion goes. It's coming up on November 9th through the 14th. If you write clean contemporary romance and would like to do a newsletter swap with me, send me an email or message me on Facebook. I would really appreciate a share during that time. That's November 9th through the 14th. And yeah, I guess I'll be talking more about those books later during the part. So Lindsay gave us the topic. She's like, guys, we should talk about this. And I totally misunderstood it. And so I prepared something very different from what they prepared. I mean, it was kind of related, but anyway. And then also just a quick reminder, I'm in a story bundle with, let's see who all is in it. Craig Martell, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and Joanna Penn's books in it. And I'm trying to remember. Oh my goodness, Kevin McLaughlin. I don't know how he says his name. I think Michelle Jeffries is in it, and I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, guys. Sasha Black. Anyway, storybundle.com/nano to go grab your copy, and it's available now through like the first week of December. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, those are kind of books that will help people that are doing NaNoWriMo, right? It's a big, they do it every year. It always looks like a really good collection for the $10 or whatever.
Yeah, so it's like all things writing. So there's some that are geared to how to write during NaNoWriMo, and others that are geared to writing in general, and others that are geared to what to do after your NaNoWriMo book is done. Mine are always marketing books because that's kind of what I do. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And Joe, I have to warn you, if you do a palette cleanser between your epic fantasies, that's how you end up with a 6-book Werewolf and Witches series. So that'll probably happen. I'm just going to warn you now.
I will not be upset if that happens.
All right. Well, I guess for my news, I finished the rough draft of my 4th Dragon Gate epic fantasy novel. It was about 160,000 words when I finished, and I'm editing now. So you know that advice that you should like shave down 10% of your words when you edit? Well, I shaved those down and then I add back 20%. So it's creeping up in word count, which is pretty typical for me. So basically it's kind of in line with the previous. It was another big complicated story. So I decided to make my winter a little lighter and write 3 more werewolf books in between this and the next epic fantasy. I'm just editing this and going, oh my gosh, I'd already be almost done if this was one of my 65,000 word books. And it doesn't hurt that those have been selling well. So that's always a bonus. Like if something bombs, you're a lot less tempted to like, let's turn this into a 6-book series. But yeah, I feel like I want to slow down and take a little more time off. We talked about that in the struggles episode. So I actually signed up for some cross-country ski lessons coming up in January, February, to make sure at least one day a week I leave, not only take my butt out of the chair, but leave the house, drive up to the mountains and do something fun. All right, so that is our news. I guess we will start with the main topic of how we would start from scratch if we were starting new today. Again, this is assuming we have our knowledge, so we're not fumbling in the dark completely, but yeah, this is what we would do. And I think Joe is going to jump in and do his first.
Yep. So yeah, a few criteria on this, and Lindsay mentioned earlier, I'm going to assume that I still have a day job during this process, for the bulk of it anyway. It's speculative for me too. I have not started a new Like no stealth pen names that anybody knows about that I feel like talking about. So yeah, and also I was not the first person to put anything into this document. So mine's got a couple extra experimental things to differentiate, and I'm discussing those as we come along, I'm sure. So I would probably pick a genre that can tolerate books between 60,000 and 75,000 words. There's no shortage of genres that are of that approximate length. And books that are that long, I wouldn't have a lot of difficulty producing them pretty quickly. Especially if my writing time was limited. A book much longer than that would eat up a big chunk of the year for me if I wasn't a dedicated writer. I also write most comfortably in sci-fi and fantasy genres, so I'd probably focus on near future sci-fi or paranormal fantasy to give me the flexibility of making things up so that I don't have to be, faithfully accurate to certain subject matter, but still familiar enough that it's a semi-real world setting, so new readers don't have to spend a lot of time getting up to speed. I think that would make it more accessible more quickly. I would take time to become very familiar with the elements of the subgenre that people are looking for. In the past, I have made the mistake of sort of perusing a new genre, picking the things about it that I like, and then focusing on those. And the things that I like and the things that an audience are looking for can be different. So especially since in this speculative thing, I'm going to be doing something I've never quite done before, particularly because in theory, I'm starting new. I would make sure that I know exactly what to include to put it, nicely in the pocket of the genre that I was shooting for. I would want a premise that would give me a built-in plot structure. You'll see a private eye is fairly common because private eyes have individual cases, and that works well to wrap things up into individual books. Mercenary bounty hunter also works for depending on what setting I'm going for. So I pick one of those. Just something that lends itself to a self-contained story. And I would try to focus on something that can be read as a standalone and in any order, at least initially. I would write the first 3 books before releasing any of them. They would be on the short side, like I would be aiming more to that 60,000 than 75,000. And each one would effectively be a standalone, same setting, same character and everything like that. But I would want each of the books to be able to stand on their own. And I go for budget covers on these, photo manipulations or pre-mades if I can, and if the genre allows for it, because again, people look for a certain type of cover in certain genres, and sometimes photo manipulation and pre-mades, just don't work for that. Ideally, I would choose one where it does work for it, but if it needs to be illustrated, then there's a stunt that I pulled. I didn't actually deploy it, but I prepared myself for a series of sci-fi books where I got a bunch of backgrounds and a bunch of foreground objects, and then I would just mix and match them to be able to, get a couple different covers out of some very basic raw materials from an illustrator, and I would have budget illustrated covers. In those cases, again, I'm shooting for $200 per cover in this case, less if I can, but probably not less than that. I would do a lot more revisions on these books. Actually, I would reread these books a lot more often, more times through than I do now. I would try to make sure that the manuscripts are as clean as possible before I send them out to an editor, because again, I'm gonna be trying to put 3 books out on that $2,500. So I need to save money everywhere I can. And lots of editors have different levels of edit. Some of them are just proofreading, and some of them are reading for consistency of voice and looking for plot holes and stuff. Typically, the less editing they do, the less they charge. So I would be trying to make sure that everything was consistent and the plot was rock solid, so that only thing they need to find are the typos. And then hopefully I'd save a little bit of money that way. Definitely I'm getting professional editing. So I can't say I'm just not going to do professional editing, but I'm going to try to make sure that I can get away with minimal professional editing. I would start with Kindle exclusivity, and I would be releasing these first 3 fairly rapidly. Probably not Probably about once every 3 weeks. I feel like any tighter than that would be pointless, and further apart than that, you're going to fall off that honeymoon period that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. During the release process, the newest release would be 99 cents, and the previous ones would be probably $2.99 or $3.99. I would lean toward $3.99 just for profitability. And I would have links to the upcoming releases in the back matter until all of them are out, and then links to all of them in the back matter once they're all out. Again, because in this hypothetical scenario, I'm trying to make sure that you can read them in any order. The call to action would be to sign up for my newsletter. And I'd have an onboarding sequence on the newsletter that asks for reviews and pushes the fact that there are 3 books. Again, trying to make sure that everybody consumes all of them, regardless of what order that they're in. And I would also have one that asks for feedback on the stories. And I would have a website, but it would be super simple, basically just a landing page. That would have newsletter sign up, and I would have a Facebook fan page and a Twitter account, all of them author based, not book or genre based. I made that mistake in real life. I don't want to make it again. And they would all be focused basically on just announcing new releases and getting newsletter signups at this point. I would use those 3 releases that I just described. I would be using them as a laboratory, basically, while I was writing the next stuff. So while they're out, I would be seeing which of them that did best. I would ideally have the covers be slightly different, like basically using these as an A/B test or ABC test, I guess. Because again, I'm certainly new in this genre. It's, hypothetically new to writing in general. So I would want to find out which of these books was doing best. And then if there was a standout, if one of these books turned out to be way more popular, either because of a better plot or because I did better job on the blurb and the cover, then I would basically consider that to be my pilot. Like that would be my entry point to this, my official entry point to the series. And I would continue the plot of that book into 3 more books, or 3 to 5, depends on how well they're doing. And at this point, I would probably be tinkering with some low-level Facebook ads and stuff to make sure that once I got those 3 to 5 books ready, I would have some mature marketing chops to start directing people to them. And once I had at least 2 books in the story arc done, I would do a box set of the 3 books, those first 3 stories, and I would launch that box set along with the first of the arc that I just finished writing. Deep discount on the stuff that's already out, trying to funnel people through to what will hopefully be a continuing series, and then release new ones as quickly as I can comfortably release them. So that would be my speculative method for starting now.
Yeah, I feel like if you had a genre that needed illustrations, you would just have to maybe not do that one right now.
Yeah, poor
Although
decision on a budget.
That's so few that maybe lit RPG, even epic fantasy, I've seen symbol covers do great, and those are pretty inexpensive to have done. So, and space opera I did with my pen name. We just did cheap Photoshop covers, and they're not gorgeous, but they got the job done and they conveyed the genre. I was curious because a lot of us have a lot of overlap on what we would do. I was curious, what makes you want to do standalone instead of connected books? I guess I'll just let you, because I feel like we'll see when I do mine, I very deliberately I'm doing an overarching series because I have such better sell through when I do that with a series where each one is a complete story, but you kind of have to see what happens next. And with your bounty hunter thing made me think of The Mandalorian. And I'm not sure I would have really, I enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed ooh, baby, what Grogu, it's not Baby Yoda anymore. You got a name in the season 2.
Grogu?
Something like that. But yeah, that was whoa, I got to see what happens next. That little teaser at the end. And then that was the over arc of of both seasons, really. It was and that's kind of what drew me in. So yeah, I was just curious why you picked that.
Partially to differentiate myself from what you'd already written, because again, I filled mine in second, but also because I feel like one of the things I wish I had done more when I started the first time was to sort of laboratory and workshop things. I sort of just put stuff out and hope for the best. in the beginning, and I felt like if I had a couple of standalone stories that were, again, same character, same setting, same everything, basically just monster of the week style stuff, then it would give me the opportunity to test out three entry points as opposed to committing to one and hoping for the best. I don't know that this is necessarily the best way to go about it, but I definitely feel like early on, if I had experimented and measured my success a little bit more, I probably would have had a better structured first series. Because my first series, while it did very well and is probably still my best overall in terms of sales, just because of its size, I made a lot of mistakes with launching that I probably wouldn't have made if I had done a couple of tests before committing to anything.
It is kind of funny though that that was your most successful series, because I think you've talked about before how it was basically one big book and you chopped it up in three. So I
Yep.
assume they're pretty cliffhangery endings at the end.
Very. The book 1 to 2 is horrifically cliffhangery.
See, readers hate it, but it gets them going. But yeah, I think Andrea also had some comments too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was just actually gonna comment on that cliffhanger thing. Like, I have a huge cliffhanger in my Coven Chronicles, and it's like a mean cliffhanger. And my readers, like, that read through is so good. And as a reader myself, like, I hate love cliffhangers. Like when Lord Voldemort is back at the end of book 4, I was like, what? And then we had to wait 2 years to find out what happened. Those cliffhangers suck because that's 2 years, but that cliffhanger in a faster release, like an indie author release schedule, is great. Okay, so I love the length of book you picked, and I think that that's a really good length just because almost every genre entertains this length well, the 75,000 words ish, around there to 80 or whatever. What exactly did you say it was? 60 to 75,000. Yeah, that's a really good length. And most authors can achieve that, beginning or non-beginning, and again, most genres can handle it well. And the standalones caught my attention. I think that as a reader, these books work really well for me. There's a lot of authors who write similarly to that, I read those books. But I do still read them in the correct order. The thing I found with a lot of standalone books that are in a series, readers are like, hey, which one is which? Can you put the numbers somewhere so I can see which one to read in which order? And you've got rabid fans already. They'll be like, okay, Joe, all right, which one is which? I don't remember. Did you say you would do it under a pen name or you would do it under your current name?
We'll theorize that this is me starting off, so we'll say that it was a pen name that nobody, like, with no connection to my past.
Okay.
Yeah, that was sort of the premise for the show. It's like if we were starting with no contact, like no network, limited budget, nobody to help us, basically, what would we do?
Okay, so if we had the knowledge we have now and our talents we have now, but as a brand new author. Okay, I got it, Lindsay.
Excellent.
That's a little bit of a spoiler alert for my part. I didn't know what the subject was. Anyway, so I love your comment on the premise giving you a built-in plot structure. Honestly, like, researching the market can give authors so many ideas for a book. For example, what is selling really well? What's the structure of those books? What sorts of tropes do well and which don't? You can tell by reading the books that are selling really well, and then give you a lot of material inspiration for your own book. And so a lot of the work is already done for you. You don't have to come up with something completely from scratch, especially with that investigator, the detective. What was that? I can't see in your spot, but that's, you talked about that, right?
Private investigator, yeah.
Yeah, private investigator. Yeah, that gives you a lot of material to go by. I mean, you go by Grimm, the big one that everybody's gonna think of automatically, Dresden Files, things like that. So that's a lot of fun. And if an author followed this plan perfectly, I think they see a lot of traction, mainly because you're doing it in a smart way. You're following the genre, the market, and you're hitting all the tropes, things like that. Potential problems, of course, would be if it takes an author a year and a half to get the 4th book out, and what would they do with their newsletter list in the meantime? And then those, the series that you were planning on doing with the full arc structure and all of that. Anyway, so I see that the whole purpose of these initial books is to get a name out, establish a platform, and research for the series you'd follow those books with. And I like that. I think that would work really well in your situation. I think for somebody like me, it wouldn't work well, because every book needs to have I I can't write a Pizza Dragon book. I would love to, but everything I publish has to have monetary value for me. Otherwise, because there's just not enough time. And I'm curious about the release strategy. I'd love to see if you actually do implement this. And I mean, if you would possibly, I don't know if you plan on it, but I'd love to see in action and analyze the results and see what sorts of things work. And if having 3 entry points into full series does well and how readers react to it. So yeah, I love the market research that you would put into it from seeing how those 3 books do. So it would be kind of cool.
I'll certainly let everybody know if I pull that off. Although it would probably be like 2 years from now before I had any sort of data from that.
2
Yeah.
years later.
Before Andrea's, I just wanted to add too that like I did not do any kind of cliffhanger with the first werewolf book. Because I was just like, oh, I'm just writing 3 of these. They'll just stand alone. And yeah, the sell through is not that great, to be honest. Like the book 1's selling great, book 2's doing fine, but I see a really big difference in between that and other series I've done where at book 1 it's like, whoa, shoot, I got to see what happens next. Versus like, oh, they're in a good happy place. Here's a nice book. What's next on my, KU whatever I've borrowed. So just food for thought.
And a little bit of a word on that. Like it depends on the genre, of course. I had a friend who wrote a bunch of romance books that were cliffhangers in a series, and readers gobbled them up back then and left really bad reviews. And so the series is pretty much dead now, but back then it did really well. And so I'm like, don't do this with romance because that would be a really bad thing.
You have to really carefully craft it. I did one like that with my pen name that was a 5 books arc. They basically were kidnapped from Earth and had to get back to Earth, but a different couple in each one. That's what the romance readers expect. So you have to have happily for now, at least for the couple, even as the story continues. And that did sell better than the other series I did with my pen name, but I think that the ones that were each one was a complete story or more like fan favorites, I think it was a better series. So it's trade-offs. It can be really tough with romance to have kind of you don't see that very often for a reason. Like that's tough to pull off.
Yeah, and that, like, you can think of like Twilight, that whole thing is heavy. I mean, that is way romance. Watching that with a man, they're like, when are they going to fight to the death? Like, oh, at the last 5 minutes of the movie. Okay. But I mean, that's romance the whole way through. And it doesn't necessarily end in cliffhangers, but it does. Like, is she going to become a vampire or not? And so, I mean, you have to find ways to keep people wanting to read, even if you write, fantasy romance or whatever, or paranormal romance. Okay, so going into my section, this is about a 5-minute or 10-minute throw together that I did. I am going to do a course based off of what I put together because it was like 5 pages long or 4 pages long or something. And it'll be basically how to self-publish now and what I would recommend you do now to self-publish. And I'm going to see if I can get that available by next week, and I will let you guys know in our next episode, whenever that's going to be. I have got my romance author mastermind, and Lindsay's got 20 books to 50K, so we'll figure it out and let you guys know. Anyway, so be watching for a course because I've already done all the work for it except the recording. But okay, so my strategy for starting out now. And since I did just start a new pen name at the beginning of this year, and I did start a new genre, this is going to be me talking about what I did, plus what I would have done if life had gone as planned. So I first picked the genre, and I used Alex Newton's K-Lytics reports for a genre analysis. And then I went through Publisher Rocket for keywords. I did a search for search terms, basically checking out how much those terms made through Publisher Rocket. So, and what I mean by that is I went to Amazon and I started typing out the search, and then I saw what people are searching for, and then I plugged those into Publisher Rocket. And then I used Alex Newton's K-Lytics report just to understand, like the length of the book, how much I needed to charge for it. And the length I picked was 50,000 words, and they will get longer based on, yeah. So I don't know if you guys remember when Elena Johnson was on the show. I've decided to do something similar to what she did because that really works for me. It plays to the fantasy, the reason I love writing fantasy. So what she does is she has viewpoints from future romance characters in current books. And the reason that works for me is because I get invested in characters and I like to enjoy them across a long while, and not just enjoy them, but delve into their brains in current books and in later books. And so I've got in the books that are the 2 books that are published now, I've got scenes from other characters in them that are, from previous books and things like that. And I haven't had any feedback on that yet. I haven't done enough with the series to know if people like that or not, but it's, it's got 22 reviews and a almost 5-star average. And most of those are people I don't know, because I found out that my romance reader list died after not using it for 3 years. That kind of happens, right? It's coming alive again, slowly and surely. Anyway, so, and I also use my brother's report on porn searches. My brother Mike, not Josh. He told me, he's like, guess what? The top 5 things women search for when it comes to porn on Google. And I was like, oh, this ought to be interesting. The first one was billionaires. The second one was surgeons. The third one was like vampires or werewolves. The fourth one was the other one, vampires or werewolves. And then the fifth one was, geez, I can't remember right now. It's like right at the tip of my brain. If I remember, I'll come back to it. Anyway, and so I picked surgeons. So I write medical romances. Anyway, and I didn't go with straight surgeons. I went with doctors, and I would like to go to surgeons. Like the first one's about a cardiologist. And anyway, so I wanted to capitalize a little bit on that. And it's not, my books are clean, but women who read clean books, we still have those same urges, guys. As people who don't write and read clean books. We're still humans. We still enjoy sex and stuff like that, even if we don't want to read it in our books. And so, I mean, it's the same biological tendencies and things like that. And so, surgeons and all that. Anyway, so then I took that and I wrote a book I was passionate about. I really, really enjoyed writing it. I've got lots of really fun scenes in it, where, the main character has to do her laundry at the love interest's house, and she accidentally leaves a bra behind. She's hanging on the doorknob. She goes back to get it, and he's like holding it like, crap, what do I do with this? He's holding it with one finger with the bra strap. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of fun to write. And, anyway, so then I wrote a reader magnet, and it's based on the dean of the hospital where all of the characters will happen. And I picked the dean because he's going to be in every single book I write that revolves around this hospital, but he's never going to be a main character of a main book. And so I'm like, the dean is really great because every single book will relate to that reader magnet in some way. So I could write like 50 books and have like multiple series, like 5-book series, all based around the same hospital. So the first series is the cardiology wing, and then the next one, I haven't decided what the next series is going to be about, but anyway, so that dean, he's like in the center and everything revolves around her. So that reader magnet will pull readers in regardless of where they enter into this ecoverse. Ecoverse, is that a word? Yes, that I've created for this series. Anyway, and that one's based on a pretend engagement, which was so much fun because you get to the kissing really fast because they're supposed to be engaged. So they're like making out a couple pages in. And yes, makeout scenes are fun to write. Anyway, so I set up my usual automation sequence. So the first email gives the freebie. The second email asks them if they were able to get that freebie. The third email tells them about the next book in the series, which I do have out. The third email, tells them to come join me on Facebook. I've got a Facebook group for my romance readers. And I did separate. Okay, I'll go into that a little bit later. The fourth email it tells them about the next book. The fifth email asks them to leave a review on that first book. And then the sixth email asks them to join my review team. And then, okay, so website and social media. So what I've done there is the pen name is related enough to my current name where if I had all the time in the world, and I'm still finding hair all over me from that beard. That's so nasty. Anyway, so my website, it's related. Well, the pen name is too well related. I didn't want to start a completely new website because I know I don't have enough time to maintain everything. So everything goes under my Andrea Pearson website. Everything goes under my Andrea Pearson Facebook account. I don't cross the streams when it comes to my newsletter list. I have a completely separate newsletter list. My also bots have been really solid so far. They've been they've been really, really good right on the genre. So that's been really, really great. And even the subgenre. So I know I've done a really good job this time around. Last time around with romance, I made the mistake of telling my readers, I was like, oh, the books have been out long enough. After 6 months, I decided to tell my Facebook readers. But the problem is my Facebook readers are rabid fans. And I'd been doing that for, at that point, 7 years. And I'd only been doing the romance for 6 months. And they quickly just overpowered the progress I'd made with the romance. And because I was also still writing fantasy. And this time I've done a complete switch from fantasy to romance. And so it's not like I'm going back and forth between the two. And that was a big mistake. I should never have told my fantasy readers about my romance book. Sorry, guys, I love you. And one of my favorite readers actually listens to the podcast. Hi, David. Anyway, so I won't ever tell my fantasy readers about my romance books just because it's just not worth it. And they can still find me if they go to my website. They can still find my romance books. Anyway, so I arranged for newsletter swaps after I'd written that book and no, before I wrote the book and published it. No, before I published the book. Sorry, my brain is so scattered today. I arranged for newsletter swaps. I released the book into Kindle Unlimited because romance does do pretty well in Kindle Unlimited. So does urban fantasy. And let's see. Yeah, I released into Kindle Unlimited because my life is complicated. Almost all my books are in Kindle Unlimited right now. And because I just don't have the time to, I really feel bad. I really miss working with Kobo, but I just don't have the time to do my book business basically right now. And so it's on the back burner a lot, which is unfortunate. Okay, so announce to people. I have a question mark on that. I did not announce my book except to my romance list because, again, I didn't want to cross the streams. I love Ghostbusters. I'm going to just continually refer to them, but didn't want to cross the streams and have problems with my algorithms and my also bots. And so it's harder to announce to people when you can't announce to people. I did not tell my current fantasy readers about it, but I did tell my current romance readers, and that I've got 1,000 readers on my romance list. And I think I got only like 10 downloads from them because I hadn't emailed in 10 months in 3 years. And let's see. So I hadn't told you guys either. So if I were starting out right now with all the knowledge I have, I probably still wouldn't tell you guys what I was writing right at the start, just because of the problems with the algorithms and also bots. In the beginning, in the very, very beginning, things are very sensitive. It's kind of hard to get off the ground. And I haven't told people on my personal side. I haven't told anybody that romance exists, not on my personal account or anything, just again, because of the algorithms. Anyway, so I set up promotions using the regular websites like Robin Reed's. I'm trying to remember which ones I used. ENT did not accept me because I did not have enough reviews. Let's see, Fussy Librarian. Anyway, Reading Deals and Book Sense, all of those. I did those when it first launched. Did not have a whole lot of movement from it, mainly because I didn't have a lot of reviews. It's really, really tough to get the ball moving when you don't have that built-in system of lots of reviews and everything. And I got like 2 reviews on launch day from the review team I'd set up years earlier. And I was kind of horrified to find that they were my fantasy reviewers who had somehow sneaked into my romance reviewers list. And so it's like the top romance or top review on my #1 romance book for a long time was from somebody who was named like Urban Fantasy Lover. And I'm like, ugh, dang it. So, oh man. That was great. I ended up having my assistant go through, and I feel bad about this, but she went through and removed anybody who was on both of my review teams because I love them very much, but I don't want that coming into problem. I could add them eventually again later when I've got several hundred reviews, but right now when I'm not able to devote as much time and I'm not writing and releasing as quickly. I'm rambling so much, guys. Sorry. Anyway, so I'm not going to put them back in. Okay, so I set up a pre-order for the next book, which by that point was mostly written. And I ended up releasing that book early, which is an ideal situation for me if it's a later book in a series, just because then I don't take the time to fill in the time, set up a pre-order well in the future. And then you fill up that time until that, instead of releasing early, most people usually fill up the time and release at that point. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I released it several weeks earlier than that pre-order was set up for. I kept the first book price at 99 cents and the next books will all be at $2.99. Okay, so very briefly, what I would have done if I hadn't had a crazy last few months, I would have released 5 books by now because I'm a fast writer. They're easy to write and they're easy to publish. And the first one came out in March or something. I would have run multiple promotions by now since they're in Kindle Unlimited. I would have done giveaways targeting my Facebook ads, targeted through Facebook ads. And so that I would be sending the correct, readers of cleaner romance to them. I would have reached out to other romance authors and asked if their street teams would like to review for me because I've done that with fantasy before and that works really well. And I do know a lot of romance readers who write clean romance. And so it's not like I would be cold contacting them. I would have had Facebook ads to them. I would have done Amazon ads. I do have a bunch currently going to the first book, but they're not optimized and they're not doing super well because I haven't been anyway. So I basically would write, release, promote. I wouldn't worry about rapid releasing because I'm a fast enough writer where it's not so much of an interest to me, mainly because I can't predict my life. And so I wouldn't set up pre-orders and I wouldn't plan to do a rapid release because of how insane my life was. My plan was in March was to write a book every 6 to 8 weeks. And if I hadn't moved and had surgery and sprained my ankle and all of that, then it would have worked. And I've done that in the past. So I know I'll be able to get back to it again later. It's just not something that I'm going to plan for or would plan for in my given current state. And I still talked for like 4 pages. Sorry.
So this is cool because you haven't actually told us before your genre. You said romance, but it's funny that it's medical romance because about a year ago, I remember Alex Newton, I think he did a report and I checked it out. He was like, oh, what's this? Because I have a friend that works in the field. She's like a medical health professional and she knows so much stuff and she loves to write, but she hasn't published really, or she's published like one thing on her pen name. But I was like, you got to write this. This is wide open. Like, I don't know how it is now, a year later, but it was like, hardly anything was in that category on Amazon and it looked like awful. Except for our listeners, if you write medical romance, obviously your books were amazing, but there was a lot of awful stuff in there. I was like, you could totally do this. You could get in there. So I'm curious, have you found that it's compared to like the other contemporary romance options, relatively less competitive, but still like a hungry audience?
Yes, actually I have. I think that's one of the reasons why my books are doing so well. And another thing, most of the contemporary romance books that are medical are spicy, which means it's wide open for clean romance readers. Anytime you've got a romance genre or any genre that tends to have a lot more spice in it, you've got the same market who wants that but wants it clean. And it's pretty wide open right now for clean authors. So if you write clean authors and you want to come join me on the bloody side of writing medical romance, can't be too bloody, but yeah. So the reason I picked medical romance was because of I was watching that first report that came out last year when he was like, medical romance is a new category. And, I was like, hey, I need to hop on that. And I have a background in medical stuff, I mean, that's what my degree is. And then my husband does medical stuff. Right. And it's one of my biggest passions. I've always been fascinated. My favorite classes are anatomy. And so I'm like, this is a genre. I can take what I know and easily write a book, so my first book, they have to do a coronary, like they have to do they have to put a stent in. And because my dad's had stents and I've had to research that and all that, I knew how all that worked. And so it was very easy to research. And so, yeah. So yes, there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot of movement. The genre is doing much better now. When that category, when it first came out, yeah, it was full of books that were not really medical romances. It was like some Navy SEAL book that they probably had a medical person as a minor character in the book, but now it's a lot of doctors. And so, yeah, so it's doing better now.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask if you were daunted at all by having to do research, because I feel like I have a friend, actually, I have all these geek friends because I'm a geek that are like computer science people, but they still like reading the billionaire software executive romance or whatever. And they smash these books because they're like, that's not how anything works in the computer field, but that's good that you have that background and we're able to draw on it. Like, because I feel like that is one of those genres where if you got a lot wrong or just kind of hand wavy them, that people would give you a hard time in the reviews.
Yeah, and because it's clean romance, I kind of have to go light on. I mean, you can't. It's romance in general. You can't have it be super graphic, and so that helps too. But yeah, and then I've had like a million surgeries, and so I can just pull off of my own personal hospital experience.
It's funny, like you're talking about, like, you look at the list and the number one things that people search for. A couple of years ago, I was at Book Expo America, and they had a gigantic thing for a romance imprint, and it was like, we've got every man you might be looking for, and it was literally like the passionate billionaire, the lone cowboy, the bad boy millionaire, the faithful cowboy. And I was like, it was nothing but rich people and cowboys. And I was like, surely, surely there must be some other subject matter that people are after. Or we need to have a billionaire cowboy. But
And
good.
I just remembered pirates was number 5.
Pirates, right?
So there you go.
But yeah, okay, so like, because this actual this actual new launch that you did, you have your history that you have to worry about contaminating your readership, your previous readership, contaminating the reviews and whatnot, and messing up your also bots. Just, this is sort of a speculation, but do you feel like it would have been easier if you were legit starting from scratch? Like, there would be so many fewer steps that you'd have to take to avoid having the algorithm get messed up. Like, do you think that starting with no audience at all would have actually been easier in that regard?
Yes, actually, I do, because I had to be so careful. Like in the beginning, when I first did my romance 3 years ago, I combined everybody into one Facebook group. And that was, I was like, oh, this is going to be so much easier. But that ended up contributing to my problems too. And so I was like, I've got this little romance group. I mean, I separated them out, and I think I hurt a couple readers' feelings because I was like, I can't allow. And anyway, so I didn't end up telling anybody really, and I think it would have gone more smoothly if I hadn't had a readership already, and I wouldn't have been tiptoeing all over the place and feeling like I was cheating on my fantasy readers like that. The guilt and everything, I'm over it now, but it was really, really hard in the beginning because these readers will read literally everything I write, and I absolutely love them for it. But on the marketing side, I can't have them read my romance until I am way more established as a romance reader. And I think a few here and there wouldn't be a problem, but I couldn't send 7,000 of them to my romance books. So yeah, I think it would have been a lot easier if I hadn't already had an established name and persona and everything.
All right, so now that I know that porn pirates is a thing that people look for, this explains things I've had questions about. I remember somebody shared an erotica book. It was called like Pounded by Pirates. And I just remember this because the blurb was so hilarious. I was just dying and sharing it with all my friends. If you are the author of that, excellent work. It did get the, it made me, what do you call it? Go take it viral, right? Like share it with everybody because it was just so hilarious. But I'm like, pirates. And now I know, number 5 on the Google search. Okay, we're at almost an hour, so I'll try to cruise through mine here without, look, it's 2 pages of solid text. Apparently this wasn't a light topic. But for me, I guess first thing I would decide is, do I want to go exclusive or wide? I think I'd probably pick Amazon and KU exclusive to start out, just so I could focus my money, because I have given myself a limited budget here, and kind of the brain power on just focusing on one store, and also to hope to take advantage of the page reads and the fact that borrows count as sales as far as the sales ranking, though I really doubt, as somebody coming in new without any connections or able, networking or anything, that I would get into any like top 100s. So if that totally didn't work, I would totally guys, I would keep the idea of wide open, and I might actually like go wide and then focus on one store, like pick like Google Play or maybe Apple, whichever one. Like I might try to become an expert on the one store, just because Amazon.com is super competitive right now. And if you don't have a big advertising budget, and you're not writing in like medical romance, which, and I don't know if it's still the case, but maybe less competitive because it's so far, these are over time, these things all people like find them, right, and start to, it blows up with how many books are in there. But let's just say I'm going KU to keep things easy. And I would pick a genre that obviously I like to write in, that has readers, something that is clearly defined, and not too competitive, but it seems that there are readers, but not like it doesn't take 1,000 ranking in the Amazon store in order to get to the top 100. So as a fantasy sci-fi person, I'd probably pick something like space opera. That one's really quite defined, really easy to know how to do covers for that one. Or after my recent experience with the witches and werewolves story doing well, I might pick something like that, which I was looking at. There's a category werewolves and shifters, and there's also category psychics that I was like, oh, that's interesting. And they're under mystery, thriller, and suspense, mystery, paranormal. So it's really quite drilled down there. But these could also go under that kind of bigger urban fantasy slash paranormal fantasy category. That's one of those ones where it's, like I said, a big top 1,000 in the store just to rank in the top 100 kind of thing. So starting in a really small pond, but with the possibility that it could, if it did pop into the rankings, it might show up in the other one. But so that's kind of what I was thinking I would do, just because those would be easier. Whenever I do space opera, they tend to get sprawling, epic, lots of POV characters, complicated stories after a while. I always start with like 80,000 words, and then before long, they're 150,000 words. So let's just say I'm doing psychics. And then I would design a series, and we talked about this a bit on Joe's section, where each book is a complete story, but there's a mystery, there's a big story arc that makes the readers kind of have to continue on. I definitely wouldn't do a cliffhanger with it not being a complete story, because I think that's where you really get a lot of hate from the readers. They want to feel like they did get their money's worth. They did get a book. It's not the author just trying to cash in and force you to read 20 installments. So each one would feel like a complete story or episode, but you really want to know what's going on, and you'd have like a big teaser at the end of each one, like, oh, I gotta see what happens next. And like I said, I often don't do this, even though I know it works really well, especially if I'm not planning. It's just sort of a side project, like this werewolf thing was. I was like, oh, I'm not going to write that many of those. Just needed a brain break this summer. But like I said, the sell-through tends to be better when I do that kind of thing. So I'd probably design my series to be maybe 6 books, have that in mind, with the thought that, it could go to 9 or even more if it went well. I say, as someone, I don't think I've ever gone above 8 or 9. And I would do a single main character, possibly a single POV, just because these make for simpler stories that are quicker to write. And if I was starting from scratch, I'd want to build up a backlist and hopefully get things going pretty initially by releasing pretty quickly. I remember when I got started, I did not have a backlist at all. I had 2 unrelated novels, which does not help with anything really, that I published when I first got started. I remember being so envious of these authors that had already 10 novels or something like that. They had these trunk novels that they had gotten rejected, and they decided to self-publish. So they were able to just put a whole bunch of stuff out at once. And it's not like that's going to make you instantly successful, but it does help. I think when like I, as a reader, know that, like, if I see the author's only put out 1 book and it just come out, I'm like, I'm not sure I really want to get involved with this, especially if it clearly says like book 1, because you don't know how long you're going to be waiting to complete that series. So, but if they can see like, oh, 1's out, 2's coming, 3's on pre-order, that kind of gives them maybe a little more confidence that, oh, okay, if I get involved with this, the author's writing, not 2 years apart on the books. So it's worth jumping into. And so I think, like Joe said, I would just write the first 3 novels before publishing anything. I like to do that, not just because of the rapid release and the possibility of gaining momentum, but I found that I did that with my pen name when I started. It's just, you end up, especially if you're like with sci-fi romance, I was totally building the world, the universe at the same time, developing the religion, the corporatocracy that was ruling the system, or the unit, whatever it was. And it's just, I'd think of things as I was writing books 2 and 3, and go back and make changes in 1, like to make it better, to like round out the background a little more. So I enjoy doing that. And that's why I often do that now still, is write, 3 books before I release the first one. Again, that can show the readers too that there's more on the way. In addition to that, you can kind of tell that my strength that I'm leaning on is the fact that I can, at this point in my career, write pretty quickly. I'm horrible with networking, anything like that. So this is super scant. I'm like, I would do newsletter swaps for the other authors. No, I probably would not, especially if I didn't know any other authors, because I was doing this completely anonymous me. And, building up a mailing list from scratch, it can be very hard to get into swaps with other people that have readers already. They're like, oh, your mailing list has 3 people, and they're your mom and dad and uncle. Not interested. So I would write a prequel novella as well, or like a side novella from a different point of view character and work that in as a newsletter bonus. I would get a simple website up. This is what I did with the pen name. The website's now gone because I didn't pay attention and my domain name got stolen. But a simple website up with a page for each book, with a preview chapter on each page and a newsletter sign up page. That's the most important thing. Like if you don't want to do the install WordPress or whatever, just get the newsletter sign up page in there. And then at the end of the first book, I would ask for a review. This is probably something I would take out later, but in the beginning I'd have no reviews. So I'd want to ask for them from anybody that was willing to get that book. Mention the bonus and link to the newsletter, like come get the free prequel novella. And then, of course, use BookFunnel to distribute that, thank the reader, all that stuff. At the end of book 2, again, I'd probably ask for a review and link to book 3. At the end of book 3, I'd ask for a review again, because this is the most important thing when, not the most important thing, but it is a important thing. If you're going to start trying to like book promos, do ads, they're always going to do better, probably most likely, if you can get a few reviews and it's just not just empty. Especially if it's a book that's been out for a while. If it doesn't have any reviews, I feel like that's a bit of a strike against it. So at the end of book 3, you know, I'd mention the newsletter again and the bonus in case they missed it. You know, at least in the Kindle store, they like to like, you hit the end sometimes and they don't, you know, if the person doesn't actively flip, they don't realize there's more. So I don't think it's worth, I think it's worth mentioning the newsletter in multiple books. As far as pricing goes, I would launch book 1 at 99 cents with the thought that like, if this is not working, if this is not gaining traction, I would do the 5 days free right away. That's actually what I did with my pen name. I made the first book wide so that I could have a perma free on Amazon and then put the other ones into KDP Select. We've talked about this before. Book 1 was a complete story. So if readers on other sites read it, they wouldn't be annoyed. It wasn't, you know, a cliffhanger in that case. But if I am doing a cliffhanger, that's a question mark. Would I do that or not? I think I would not with this and just stick with the allotted free days. But yeah, I would just go ahead and use them right away if nothing was happening. And then for books 2 and 3, I would do probably $3.99 for books this length, unless they went a lot longer than I expected. $4.99 is kind of my standard, partially because I do Patreon and have a $5 level, and I don't want people to feel cheated, but also because a lot of my books are more like 100,000 words. But if I succeeded in doing maybe like 70, 80,000 word books, I'd probably do those at $3.99. Advertising, again, not much of a budget here because I feel like I would basically pay the editor, pay the cover art on those 3 books, and that would take up most of that $2,500, unless I went super bare bones. Which if I had the money, I'd probably try to invest in as good of covers as I could get and solid editing for the beginning. Like Joe kind of mentioned, I would, if I was newer, you know, do a workshop or something to make the books really confident that the story was in a good place and just pay for light you know, the more of the proofread kind of thing. So when I publish these first 3, I'd probably do kind of like rapid release. Book 1, book 2, as soon as a week or 2 weeks later, especially if I'm doing a 99-cent book 1, you're losing money kind of at that point. Book 2 and then 3, maybe a month after that. That's actually what I did with these werewolf things. I'm so like I honor my work, guys. These werewolf things, they're art, they're great. But yeah, I would also start writing book 4 while the others are releasing, with the intent of having it ready to go within a couple of months after the release of book 3. If you can keep up monthly releases, great, but that's a crazy pace for most people. And even as writing as a pretty quick writer, doing this full time now, which I would assume I would not be doing at the beginning if I was starting from scratch, that would be tough. But I found that if you get those first 3 out pretty quickly, readers will cut you some slack if the next one's 2 or 3 months later. If you're waiting a year, they might forget about you. So, but switching to like every 3 months at that point, I would think would be fine. And if after all that, if not much is happening with the sales, you know, I would probably try to, like Andrea mentioned, try to get some sponsorship sites with the sort of whatever money I had left. You know, some of the obviously BookBub and stuff is going to be too expensive on that budget, and they wouldn't take a new author anyway with not that many reviews. But maybe Fussy Librarian might take it. I think BK Knights on Fiverr. I've done him recently. He still shares free stuff. So that's, you know, I guess I'm almost done. I would say also, oh yeah, I would definitely, one thing I didn't do with a lot of my other books that I think can help is putting a preview, a few pages of the next book at the end of the, like, book one. Here's a couple pages of book two if you want to kind of get into it and check it out before you go on and buy it. um, and then so I would just kind of keep plugging away and plan to write at least 2 series in this genre before letting myself wander off. Again, if it's, I try to design it so like it can be wrapped up at 6 books, but if it's doing better, maybe I can extend it to 9. It does get to be a challenge when you've got this overarching story arc. You don't want to drag things along too much with that case, but you can kind of gauge it once it's out there and see how well things are doing, if you're doing it up to your, if things are going as well as you'd hoped. And then I would at some point set up the social media stuff, but as desired, but this would be not a priority. I feel like authors really feel they have to do so many things as far as building a platform, but really I think just having the website with your newsletter sign up and sending your readers to that at the beginning is the best thing. I don't think social media sells many books, to be honest, until once you have a fan base and they're following you, it can be another place where you announce new releases. Because I do get a lot of people on Facebook that aren't even necessarily on my newsletter, and so whenever I share a new release there, it does sell books. I track those links so I know it's my number 2 after the newsletter. But you don't need to be, I don't think you need to be pressured to do that right at the beginning. So I do it as I had time. Like sometimes you just have a day where you can't write. Like, okay, we'll set up the Facebook page, share some funnies, excerpts, that kind of thing. And in later books in the series, you can also link to the social media pages to help them find you there. Okay, you guys fall asleep? Did you start editing your epic fantasy?
I certainly did. And yeah, that's a lot. This is the good thing about this episode. There's a ton of meat in it. So for new authors and even authors that are, thinking about switching pen names and stuff like that. I like the teaser idea. Mercy Thompson and Jack Reacher books don't do this. And so I'm not usually rushing out to grab the next one. And I really enjoyed those worlds. I still haven't read the most recent Mercy Thompson book, and I've only read about 10 of the Jack Reacher books, which is kind of sad considering I really enjoy them. But if they had something in them that would pull readers to the next book, even if it's, just something minor, I don't know. I think that not even minor, but, I just kind of feel like those authors drop the ball. Of course, they are traditionally published and they're not sure if the next book's going to get picked up, but guys, the next book's going to get picked up. They're not going to say no to another Mercy Thompson book or another Jack Reacher book. And Mercy Thompson does it a little bit more hi, Mike, a little bit later in the series, but still not as much as I think they could. I love the idea of writing another free tie-in story. Having a perma-free is very valuable, regardless of whether you're wide or in Kindle Unlimited. And I like the point you make on readers being more invested after 3 books and able to wait for the next ones a bit longer. That's really great. And that's a good thing to help authors calm down a little bit and stop worrying about, oh, I've got to get the next book out. So if you have the first 3 books ready and then you do a rapid release, like once every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and then wait a little bit to release the next book, I think that's not going to be a huge problem. And I also like that you mentioned you're a fast writer, so your method would lean on that. And I'm a fast writer, and if I, in my perfect hypothetical situation, I wouldn't have health problems and I wouldn't have medical problems. And like I said, I would be releasing and writing every 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Anyway, so yeah, so that's pretty much all my comments. I didn't have any questions for you. I think it's pretty well thought out and solid. So if Joe has any questions, he can ask them.
I will add before Joe goes that actually for his thing where he was doing the standalones, that would be even more important, I think, to put the preview of the next book in, kind of get them hooked. Like, oh, you thought the story was done, but the Mandalorian goes off on another adventure in book 2 and collects another bounty. And then you can do a cliffhanger in what, it's cliffhangery after whatever the first chapter of the preview.
Yeah, that was sort of a join us next time situation. All right, so as I said in my thing, that like your release strategy is, I think, like a good just like baseline. That's what should be done. I think what you have there is a very good just roadmap to release. I will say, so again, if we're using the $2,500 budget, you can stretch that to 3 books. I think the way you've described, you could comfortably release those books with that budget. But if we're talking about, an ongoing series, one would imagine that the release of the future books would, at least the timing would at least partially be based on when the first books were able to fund them. So I guess the question I would have here is, if you were starting up and you saw some moderate success with your first books, would you be investing more money into the future books, or would you hold off until it was a self-sustaining series?
Yeah, this is actually, I really love this question because I don't think we've asked each other this. And I think a lot of people are in that situation. Like maybe they were able to scrape together some money, they put it on a credit card, or, able to take it from the day job to do the first 3 books, let's say. But then what happens if you're not covering the costs of the additional books? I think in my case, like I am cocky enough to believe I could make it work, but really, if you aren't able to advertise these days, it's pretty tough. I know when I did my pen name, I think I was able to earn like $10,000 in the first couple of months, and that was with doing the perma-free, and then I had 2 full-priced books right after that at $3.99, I believe. But again, that was a long. I mean, it is a long time ago now. I think it was the winter, fall of 2014 when I did that. So it was actually before Amazon ads were even a thing, and I feel like Facebook ads were just kind of starting to become a little bit of a thing for authors. So I didn't have any money to really. I didn't invest a lot in advertising it because there weren't that many options, but there wasn't all the competition either. And that at the time was like maybe the medical romances are now. The sci-fi romances at the time were substandard covers and less competitive, so I had that working for me. So if this didn't work out as well, I think I actually forgot this in my notes, like if I wasn't gaining traction with the 3 books in KU, I'd probably write also, in addition to the prequel novella thing that I'm trying to lure people onto the mailing list with, I'd also do like a perma-free something, a complete story, but then link to or do the excerpt of book 1, like, yeah, see how these characters met in book 1 of this story, and put that out there too. And you have to go bare bones with the covers. Like if I had spent that money on the first 3 covers, those are the most important book 1 cover. I'd almost say put more money into the book 1 cover, and then like, hey, we'll just use that same model again. It's okay. We'll just put a tree in front of her. Like maybe then you go to Fiverr and ask them, just find somebody really inexpensive and ask if they can take the template, because a lot of times you can get the Photoshop files from the artist and kind of do a little more, less expensive. So I think I'd want to keep going, and however I could, like maybe I had to trade editing services or something. I've certainly seen people get their start doing that. And then I'd probably stop it at the 6, or I might be tempted to, okay, these 3 didn't quite do it, but let's see, maybe they did okay, start that second series and do it all over again. Although then you'd have to come up with another $2,500. So what would you guys do? I'm curious, because I feel like a lot of people get in this situation where they're funding this from their day job. And it's sort of like, how long do you do that? Do you just keep doing it because it's your passion? Or like, do you, at some point, you got to go, okay, this is it. I'm throwing money away at this. I got to try something new. What do you guys think?
I think that what I would do now is if I release, I have my big launch strategy and I release them. If they took off and they were doing gangbusters, I wouldn't wait the 2 months for that money to come in before I spent it. I see that I earned that money already. I would spend the money and get the next books to the same level as quickly as possible. If I wasn't making a lot of money, I would probably I would probably say this isn't going to be my career. This is going to be a fun side project. And I would write the books, and as the money from the previous books came in, I would use them to finish it up. And it would not lead, I think, to an escalating career. It would slowly build a backlist. And then maybe in the future, once I had my backlist and an income, then I would try again with a new series or maybe a new pen name, and just like use my old pen name to fund my new pen name. But I would slow things down if I was starting now and I didn't have a meteoric rise in the beginning.
Yeah, I think I might do things a little similarly to that. Like if things were going really, really well in the beginning, I would continue letting my personal life fund the business. But I mean, if it's going really well, within a couple months, it's paying for itself and then some. And if it's not going really well, I don't spend money that it doesn't make, I don't do debt or anything like that. But if it's going slow anyway, then it's not like you're like if you make $50, then putting $50 into it is going to make a difference if it's a slow build anyway. So in the beginning, I would take personal money, and then I would gradually pay back the personal money loan that I got and have the business fully fund itself.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say if it's doing well and it's a matter of waiting the 2 months to get the money, then it's easy to say, oh, I'll just put it on a credit card the next one or something, because you're pretty sure that if it's Amazon and Google and stuff, they're going to pay you. It's not like they're going to stiff you, most likely. But I think the challenge is when you're like, yeah, I've sold a few, but it's really far from covering the expenses. Although we do have to say, and I am the most impatient person, like, so I understand it, like and I've seen it from other people. I released my book 5 days ago. I haven't made any money yet. What's happening, guys? I think I would have to try to, knowing now what I do now, that I'd have to be willing to have it take time. Like this might take a year, 2 years, it's hard to gauge if it's like you're having some success. Is it worth it to keep going on the series? I'd probably finish out the series if it was my first thing, do the 6 books. And another thing you could look at too is if you just didn't have the money to continue writing, maybe on Wattpad or on your own website, kind of do like serial releases and see if you could build a fan base over time that way. Like you still have the books on Amazon, you're still, maybe you do the free days every quarter and keep trying to sell them. But that's a way to get your stuff out there without having to put any more money in it. And possibly it's rare, but I have seen people gain fan bases, accumulate fans over time, doing it on their website. And there's every now and then I come across somebody that's like been serial rising on Patreon for 7 years and has like 5,000 people giving them money every month now. But that person started 3 million words ago, probably with nobody, just doing it on Patreon or on their website, and then eventually moving to the paid model on Patreon. So I think if you're really a writer, you got to just keep going, and you can give it a couple years before you fail. I feel like people, if it, especially if you do the rapid release, you're like tempted, right, to you had it all come out in 2 months and you're like, well, I didn't instantly become a success, so this is a failure, let's move on to the next project. And sometimes these things do take time. Like you can continue every time you do the promos, the KDP countdown or whatever. Or like I said in the beginning, maybe if Amazon is super competitive and is just not getting traction, you try going wide and focus what money you have. Like a lot of the sites promote everything. So it's not like you have to pick a store, but I might, if I was going to do Facebook ads or something like that, I might pick like Google Play is where I'm going to invest all my money, and I'm going to try to build a fan base there first, rather than trying to say $3 for Google Play today, $3 for the Apple Store, $3 for Amazon. You might get a little farther by focusing on one store that's less competitive than Amazon. All right. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
I like turtles. Do you guys remember that YouTube meme?
No.
Joe does.
I remember. Yeah.
I never see it. You'll have to send it to me.
It's just this reporter is interviewing a kid at a zoo, and she asks him the question about something very serious, and he goes, I like turtles. And that's how he answered. He's like a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old kid who's nervous, and yep.
All right. Well, turtles are good. I like dogs. Mine are sleeping, so I guess I'll be done for the day. It's dark here. I'm sure it is where you guys
dark.
are too. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up the show then. No more thoughts on turtles. Thank you for listening, everyone. And thank you to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
So long, everybody.